welcome to Shaping the Future of AI Security Through Collaboration. If you're here for another session, please check your schedule. But if you're here to talk AI security collaboration, we're thrilled to have you here. My name is Jamil Jaffer. I'm a venture partner at Paladin Capital Group, and I'm the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute at George Mason University's Antonin Scalia Law School. I'm thrilled to be here with a distinguished panel to talk about how we might shape the future of cybersecurity collaboration through, with, and alongside AI. I'm going to start with some introductions. So starting to my far right, Jason Clinton. Jason is the Chief Information Security Officer at Anthropic. He oversees aspects of all security operations, including detection and response, compliance, physical security, security engineering, and IT. He also leads the organization's efforts to uphold Anthropic's responsible scaling policy, ensuring the secure and responsible development and deployment of advanced AI systems. Jason joined Anthropic in April 2023 after more than a decade at Google, where he led the Chrome Infrastructure Security Group. During his time at Google, he also worked on Chrome OS build integrity, Android Pay security, digital coupons, and secure thin clients, and holding staff and senior software engineer roles as well. Early in his career, he contributed to projects in Beowulf Computing. It was an active contributor to the GNOME project. He's also the author of Ruby PitchBook. Jason, thanks for being here. Immediately to Jason's left is Sandra Joyce. Sandra is the VP for Google Threat Intelligence at Google Cloud. Sandra's a cybersecurity leader with over 2 decades of experience. She leads Google's Threat Intelligence Group and joined Google in 2022 following Google's acquisition of Mandiant. Sandra's a board member at Crane Next, a U.S. Air Force Reserve officer, and serves on the Board of Visitors at the National Intelligence University. She's also a member of the Aspen Incident Security Working Group, the Silverado Policy Accelerated Strategic Council, and the Institute for Security and Technology's Ransomware Task Force Steering Committee. She's also a visiting fellow at NSI and an L. Perovich Institute fellow and is pursuing her PhD at Johns Hopkins University. She has an MBA from MIT and 4, count them, 4 additional master's degrees. And last but certainly not least, to Sandra's left is Matt Knight. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at OpenAI. He leads the computer security, privacy, and IT engineering and research programs. His teams protect the organization, its users, and its technology while advancing the frontiers of AI and cybersecurity. Matt directs AI and security research to advance their respective sciences, capture their benefits, and measure their risks. His teams at OpenAI are at the forefront of applying AI for cyber defense, leveraging AI to enhance security operations and address emerging threats. Additionally, Matt's program oversees the OpenAI Cyber Grant Program, whose mission is to improve cyber defense by supporting the research community and initiatives at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. So with that, join me in welcoming our group, and we'll jump right into it. All right, so Matt, I'm going to start with you since you're immediately to my right. So there are a lot who argue that the advent of generative AI, other forms of AI, are going to provide a massive benefit to the attacker, and they're not going to be as good for the defender. Do you think that's right, or will AI provide a benefit, an equal or even greater benefit to the defender when it comes to advanced cyber threats?
Yeah, so thanks, Jamil, and thanks everybody for being here, 8:30 in the morning on Tuesday. I appreciate your waking up and drinking your coffee and being here with us. So I'm about to hit 5 years at OpenAI. I joined OpenAI in summer 2020, back when it was just a very small research lab. And I joined right around the time that we launched our API service, and with it, a little-known model called GPT-3. If you were following AI back then, you may have followed it, but GPT-3 was sort of an oddity. It was sort of a curiosity. It made the rounds out here in Silicon Valley, but didn't really get beyond that to have broad impact. The way that we've seen ChatGPT and tools like it really permeate and capture people's imaginations and also impact industries too. Now, so from the very beginning, there's been a lot of sort of speculative concerns around ways in which that AI could introduce new risks, and that's not to discredit those, but OpenAI's philosophy, sort of the whole way, has been to approach this through rigorous test and eval, to try to build up the sciences of measurement here. So we were pleased to release, I believe in early 2023, our preparedness framework, which lays out a testing methodology for how we evaluate these models for risk. Looks at a series of different categories of risk that we test these models for, so that we can go from beyond vibes and into actual measurement of the risk here. That's all sort of the academic stuff. Let me talk about what this actually means for us as security practitioners. So we, within the security team, have been able to leverage our models to do what I think are some pretty cool and transformative things within our program. applying models for cyber defense, applying models to just streamline our operations and take a lot of toil out of our work. If you've ever worked with the security team, worked with the SOC, you know just how much overhead there is that goes into being a security engineer. Whether it's like writing incident PIRs and summarizing summarizing incidents, or just streamlining like the organizational outreach and navigation you have to do in order to gather information in the context of an incident. These are all tools that language models can really make a dent in. And then when we look further ahead and we think about incorporating tool use and their ability to interact with systems, we see that there are really just tremendous benefits that can support defenders and defensive work. So I think we're in the first inning here, right? We've seen, I believe we've seen these tools have asymmetric benefit for defenders versus attackers. But these tools are advancing. If we look at our preparedness evals, for the cybersecurity testing, the evaluations we've done for cybersecurity capabilities, we see that roughly every 10 months, the cybersecurity capabilities of models double. So it's very important that we as a community continue to test and monitor these risks so that we can ensure that that balance of power continues to support the defenders.
Yeah. Well, so as we think about sort of the offense and the defense, Sandra, you're on the front lines of seeing what the attackers are doing. You're gathering all the info for one of the biggest players in the room in terms of points of presence across the global internet.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how the threat looks from an attacker perspective against both AI systems, but cyber capabilities generally. How is AI changing the threat? And what do you see coming down the line when we're thinking about AI and security collaboration?
That's a great question, and thank you again for having me. This is a wonderful, like you said, 8:30 in the morning, and would not like to be anywhere else. So I will tell you what we are seeing on the front lines, and then I'll tell you what I expect to see going forward. So when I asked my team to look at what are threat actors doing today, not lurching from this headline to this headline, or this scary scenario, or this scary movie we all saw about AI. What are threat actors actually doing today, and how are they utilizing it? And what my team came back with is they're using it for deep fakes in the underground. They're using it to sell so-called jailbreak versions of some of the chatbots in the underground. We run about thousands and thousands of personas in the underground and the dark web to see what the marketplaces are saying and doing with this. So we've seen that happen. Mandiant responds to over 1,300 incidents every year. We have yet to see a single incident where the threat actor has done something new and novel above the capabilities of a normal human incident at this stage. So right now, I think we're in this pre-phase where we have a lot of time to do some innovation on the defender side. And I would say that right now, that advantage is really, truly rooted on the defender side. We're using it to reverse malware faster. We're using it to enhance our fuzzing harnesses by tremendous amounts. We're using it to scan for vulnerabilities, and we published a blog called Big Sleep. I encourage you to look at it, where we actually found a vulnerability using an LLM. And that's great news for defenders. Now, we don't have in Google the same, let's say, guardrails that the commercial-facing version has, so we can freely use it for our inner defenses. What that means to me, though, is it's just a matter of time before a threat actor will use these capabilities for offensive purposes, once they can get that type of innovation. We haven't seen it yet, but I think that we are ahead. And what this means is, in this whatever period of time, we're going to stay ahead, where we're the ones controlling the technology, we're the ones controlling the roadmaps, we're the ones that are implementing and refining the guardrails. That this innovation and this period of innovation gives us the leg up, and this is where we really need to make our investments so that we keep ahead of the attackers. So I'm actually pretty optimistic about it being a great defender tool, but we have to always keep in mind that those defender tools can be used by threat actors for offensive purposes and are likely to do at some point in the future.
I agree with everything that was just said, but I just want to add a couple of thoughts. First, also great to be here. It's great to chat with you all. And Anthropic, last week we published a blog post of some of the, as responsible players in the ecosystem, we need to monitor what actually is happening with the models. And OpenAI published something about this recently too. Just, what are we actually seeing from threat actors? So we've seen influence operations, we've seen augmentation of business email compromise types, social engineering attacks. We've seen influence operations as a service. And the kind of classic thing we've seen where there's always like a very tech-savvy kingpin who sort of like is really up to date on the latest technology and offering their wares in exchange for cryptocurrency on the black market, that kind of thing. And then we also have seen, and I think this is maybe the most important thing that we need to keep in mind, what is happening in AI right now is that we are democratizing access to the very top tier computer science talent in the world. And that means that your tier 3 actors who have you've typically been your script kiddies now have access to coding agents that can write code at the level of someone who's maybe a very competent programmer in a Silicon Valley context. And so we've seen ransomware being developed on our platform and shut that down. And those are the kinds of things where when I think about the future and I think about the next few years on the attacker side, again, the attacker defense symmetry issue, the attackers will have access to more of the typical technology that many of us on the more advanced defender side have had access to for a long time. So we need to keep an eye on that. One other really quick thought, and it sort of is a background against everything that we're talking about today. As the models get more intelligent, and as the cost to do all of the kinds of top tier engineering things that are now possible with frontier models that do good coding, our ability as defenders to look across our entire threat landscape inside of our companies becomes like the cost reduced, right? Like we all know that it's really hard to fill cybersecurity roles at companies. We can't find the talent. We don't have the budgets to actually hire the folks that we need to defend. But as models get more intelligent, they can run fully automated pen tests, they can do application security, they can prevent you from ever even shipping code in the first place. I would love to go back to being a software engineer and not being a CISO, but if we just stopped shipping bugs in the first place, I think that would be a massive augmentation to the defender side. And for many reasons, we haven't done that because we just haven't had the time and the energy and the resources to prevent the bugs from going out the door in the first place.
So Jason, I love this idea that you've laid out that things are going to get a lot easier for security defenders. I mean, it might be hard because we might have less jobs for security defenders, but it's helpful to understand that. But I want to ask you about something that Sandra just said that sort of surprised me. And you talked about there's sort of new capabilities you've seen in ransomware and the faster development of social engineering attacks, information attacks as a service. But talk about this idea that Sandra laid out, which is that Google is yet to see, and I want to make sure I get it right, Sandra, so correct me if I get it wrong. They've yet to see sort of attackers go beyond what a human would do. Yeah. More advanced, more capable, more destructive potentially, or attacks. Yeah. Did I say that right, Sandra? Is that about?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, we have seen AI used, but it's not the game changer scenario that we're waiting for.
Yeah. And Jason, is that what you've seen as well? Yeah. And if so, how far do you think we are away from AI being used to create scenarios that go beyond what a human might do, or beyond sort of the approach that a standard attacker might take?
Yeah, so there's two specific ways that we're thinking about from the responsible scaling policy, was analogized to the preparedness framework that OpenAI has. So one of them is the automation of vulnerability discovery, and Sandra alluded to that in the reference to the fuzzing augmentation. So there's this massive effort across high tech right now to fully automate the process of finding and fixing vulnerabilities in the open source ecosystem.
Yeah.
Now you can think about this from the nation state side as well. If you're a nation state and you're looking for vulnerabilities to exploit, that is obviously of significant interest for our adversaries. And so when I'm thinking about some of the threats that we have coming up, that's on my mind. Like, I think we need to race faster than our adversaries can on the vulnerability discovery side, and so that we can get those patches out as fast as possible. The second thing is something that has been referred to as polymorphic or adaptive malware, where it does use C2 infrastructure as a typical malware does, but it augments its ability to move laterally, fully autonomously inside of the network once it gets inside. So far, this is hypothetical. I'm not aware of any instance of this occurring, but it is the kind of thing that I keep thinking about. The reason it is useful, I don't know if any of you have like followed some of the nation state activity. It's fascinating to look at some of the signals that help us attribute what happens in a breach. And Mandiant probably has a lot of data on this too. But they work normal 9 to 5 hours, and so
in their jurisdiction.
In their jurisdiction, right? So you're like, okay, well, these
I
attackers
can't be bothered to do overtime.
Yeah,
They got-
exactly.
they got
But AI
hobbies.
works around the clock, 24/7, right? And so the instant it gets access, and it has an opportunity to move laterally and do this fully autonomously,
Yeah.
that's a different game.
Yeah.
You know?
I just want to jump in.
Yeah, please.
So, great points. I'll maybe just augment this with a little bit of what we're seeing in our evaluation results. So, when it comes to trying to get ahead of the curve and anticipate the way in which these capabilities are developing, at least for cybersecurity capabilities, we test the models along 2 axes, and you can read about these in. I'll tell you where to go if you want to learn more about this at the end. The first is against a battery of capture the flag exercises that we've curated, and the second is using a novel cyber range that we're developing. And they're sort of intended to test 2 different things. CTF really gets at the ability to do exploitation, right?
And
whether
you're
it's
talking about testing the models against.
That's right.
Okay.
But I think it's a reasonable reflection of like where these capabilities,
Yeah.
where these models can provide uplift, right? So things like web exploitation, reverse engineering, being able to find weaknesses in cryptography systems. We started with first getting our hands on as many CTF challenges as we could find online, right? Hundreds of them. I think we found something like 700 or 800 CTFs. And we down selected for them having working and reproducible test environments and being representative challenges that we thought were appropriate for the types of like MITRE attack categories that we thought were really interesting. And we have that instrumented in a reproducible testing framework that we can run against new models before they're released. And if we break them down by difficulty, categorize them, from whether it's easy, medium, hard, or high school, collegiate, professional, however you want to look at it, we've seen that the models sort of quickly were able to pick up the skills to do like basic, trivial high school level things, but the professional level and collegiate level has been slower. But we do see those trends increasing. Now the CTF testing is pretty limited, right? These are generally like fairly contrived problems where there's not a lot of planning involved, and if you know that there's a vulnerability there, then there's a solution. So it doesn't necessarily provide the same level of indicator that you would get for something that's a little bit more real world, like being able to plan an operation, being able to do a multi-stage, execute a multi-stage attack, and being able to backtrack, things like that. So for that, we have our cyber range, which is fairly nascent. You can read about this in the system card that we put out along with the O3 model. It talks about the construction of the range and how it's doing. And we have not seen the model be able to do anything that's like too interesting there yet. If we give the model a ton of help, like give it solver code, it can do it, but anything short of that, it's not able to do the operations planning on this fairly basic
On the
scenario.
offensive or defensive side?
Offensive.
On the offensive side.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's why we built this scenario and these scenarios so that we can do this repeatably, so that we can get the early warning when those capabilities start to develop, and then we can proceed accordingly.
Yeah.
So think about cybersecurity collaboration, Sandra.
Yeah.
If you think about what Matt just laid out in this idea of having this sort of range where you can deploy the LLMs to work offensively, as you're seeing as you guys look at all the stuff you collect on what the offensive actors are doing, could you use that data set, right? The data set of what all the actors are doing to train a model to behave offensively, to operate in the cyber range? And if so, have you tried that out? Have you sort of run that operation and seen if you fed a model all the best threat actors, right? All the nation threat actors that you see, and you said, go be a nation threat actor in a range like the one Matt's created. Have you tried it? And if so, what happens when you do that?
Well, we, in the Google Threat Intel group, we haven't tried to red team ourselves using that. But what we have trained it on is all of the intelligence we've ever created for the past 15 years.
Okay.
And so what we have done is we are using it to advance our own analytical work. And before, let's say, intelligence tradecraft was, you would, let's say Sally analyst would go and she has a lot of experience and she looks into different databases, she collects and processes, analyzes, and then creates some insights, and they're pretty good and everybody is pretty happy about that. That is not the way that anybody is thinking about getting insights now. And if you've looked at some of the new agentic frameworks and agents that are all over this conference, it really is the new way everybody wants to get insights is through a natural language interface that is then sending agents to every data source that you can, assembling and doing it in minutes or seconds, not weeks and months. And so what
So
we're
a
doing...
1,000 brilliant Sally Anns.
That's right, or more, and looking at not just what she has immediate access to, but across everything, including maybe some open source context that she may not have been aware of.
Yeah.
And so when you think about decision makers, if you ask them, do you want Sally's opinion on something? She's a really good analyst. She's been doing this for 10 years. Or we could ask the AI who is going to look at everything, all the telemetry for the past 15 years and anything that's ever been published ever on this topic. Which one would you want?
Yeah.
And right now, I think the answer is we want Sally, but we want her enabled by this technology.
Right.
And
So, okay, so that was actually my follow-up question. So Jason, I'll ask you since I'm coming down the row. Let's say you have this awesome virtual Sally analyst who's got 1,000 of her running around gathering all the data. It sounds like though the decision makers still want a human to look at that data, look at the analysis, say, is this look right? Does it feel right to me? Is that the future? Are we still going to keep humans on top of these things?
100%. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why?
So a couple things here. First, I just want to say very briefly that on the offensive side, we have seen fully autonomous attacks working pretty well. Just recently, this happened in the last 2 months. We've been partnering with a company called Expo, and they're currently top of the leaderboard for the HackerOne bug bounty program, using fully autonomous attack patterns using Claude 3.7 Sonnet. And so this portends, to your point, Jamil, about this. I do think there is, in the very immediate future, an opportunity for some amount of autonomous agents that are doing work that typical cyber defenders have done. So one of the things that I think about in this space, for example, would be, in your continuous delivery pipeline for your software, having an agent doing fully automated pen test against the software before it ever goes to production, so you find those bugs before you ship them. We talk a lot about writing code and getting the feedback loop in the text editor or in the CI pipeline, but there's an opportunity for offensive agents to even do the work in your staging environment, and I think that's a really interesting opportunity that's just now coming to the fore. The thing though is the models are going to get more intelligent. So this is my standard sum speech. I'll just hit it real quick. If you look back to 1957, the very first neural network, the perceptron, and you plot a line on the amount of compute that has gone into all neural networks over the last 70 years, there's roughly a 4x year-over-year increase in the amount of compute that has gone into models over a 70-year timeline. And so everything that I can see inside of a frontier lab right now is that increase is going to keep happening for at least the next 2 to 3 years. That's the horizon that I can see out there. And as the intelligence of these models goes up, their ability to understand business context and the situation that they're in, and then even act like a virtual employee, is something that is going to happen.
How far out are we?
Roughly 12 months, I think, before we see the first virtual employee who sort of acts like the level of an intern on a cybersecurity team. And I think that you can imagine a world like 2 or 3 years from now when all of the folks in this room are having to think about, how do I make someone who's currently an individual contributor make that first step into being a manager of a fleet of agents who work for them to achieve their objective.
Matt, what do you think about that?
So let's think about Sally analyst, right?
Yeah.
So I would love to hire, I'm always looking to hire more people, right? If you're on the market, I'd love to talk to you afterward. We're trying to grow the team. The cybersecurity talent shortage is sort of a meme, but it's also real. It's
a real
really,
thing,
really
yeah.
hard to find good people. But there's also an opportunity here to go beyond what people can do, right?
Yeah.
Think about the life cycle of like a detection within your SOC, right? An event happens, maybe it gets detected, maybe it doesn't. That detection goes and sits in a queue. An analyst picks it up, looks at it. They have to investigate. They might have to query other systems to enrich it. They might have to go and reach out to people within the organization to gather more information. Then have to make a plan and do what they need to do to either to mitigate that event. Every step in that link latency, where your organization is exposed, right? Where your adversary may be able to, to move further or leverage their, the access they've gained. It's also toil for your team, right? And when you accrue that, you have a budget, right, that you can use to defend the organization. So this is beyond just having more people, right? This is the ability to move faster, right? To be in more places.
Dramatically faster.
Dramatically faster. Yeah. And to...
Sorry, you're about to say, to be in more places at one time.
To be in more places at one time, but to move faster, to make more and better security impacting decisions across the organization. And sorry, is my mic working?
It's coming in and out.
Okay, sorry about that. And if you think about if you think about detection work,
We're solving for that right now.
thank you. So if you think about the work that some of my analysts do. It's either text in, text out, or text in, decisions out. That's a very language model shaped workflow, right? Yeah. And that's not to say that I don't need more people. I'm always going to hire as many security engineers as I can, but I'm going to equip them with tools that help them move faster, be in more places, make better decisions, and ultimately do so with in a way that's more sustainable, a better work environment for them. Because ultimately, all these things accrue to better outcomes for my organization.
100% agree with Matt. I'll just add, we just came to the same realization inside of Anthropic. So we've just redirected all of our analyst hiring budget to engineering because the agents are so good at doing what had previously been the analyst role. And so the analysts that we have now are moving up into engineering roles as the next progression in their career and journey. So it's changing things.
And I'll jump in for one thing, and that is that we also have to recognize that we are not optimized as a cybersecurity industry for the workflows that we have. So we have a cybersecurity shortage, but my guess, my hypothesis is that a lot of the shortage is because so much of the work is actually manual, toilsome work. And that what I foresee happening, and if you talk to any SOC analyst, most of them are going to agree with this. They're going to say, I don't want to log into all these different portals. I don't want to copy paste this from over here. I don't want to have to read, all these lines of code by my, they don't want to do those things, and the pace at which the threats are changing and coming at them has created this real burdensome workflow for across our industry. So what I foresee is, yes, we're going to be more efficient, and our analysts are now going to do less of that manual work, and that is good news. But I have a feeling that they're not going to just stop there. We're now going to put more as an industry on each per pound that you have to deliver per analyst or per security engineer, because now you have something helping you code. Now you have something that's going to create insights so much faster. We have to be careful that we don't just simply exacerbate the problem of toilsome work by taking all these innovations and putting them into just, now instead of reversing one piece of malware a week, I'm going to need you to do 500 a week because you have AI that's that's helping you.
So one of the things I want to ask you about, Sandra, was something you said earlier. You said earlier that because internal to your organization, I want to make sure I get this right, you don't have the constraints on the models you're using that the public has, or that others who are using your commercial version of your model, you're able to do things perhaps a little more creatively, maybe a little more aggressively to identify threats and identify potential lines of attack. Does that mean that for at least the large LLM makers, I'm interested in Matt and Jason's thoughts on this as well, you as a defender, at least defending your own system, building LLMs, and for Google, protecting a lot more landscape, that you'll always be better because you're using the unconstrained model versus the constrained model that all your attackers are using. Is that right?
We'll always be better, hopefully, for many reasons, including that we get to be on the forefront. And look, I don't think anybody wants Gemini out there scanning for vulnerabilities in the open marketplace. That is not a good thing, right? The safety guardrails are there for a reason, but as we experiment internally, we do want to push the limits of what we can do, test it internally, and then offer things to the public in a responsible way. But I'll give you this. We are watching how threat actors are using Gemini too. And they are doing things like, they're trying to get access to source code. They're trying to do prompt attacks. They're trying to get to surpass these guardrails, and so far they haven't been able to do it. But what they're doing otherwise is pretty, mundane, neutral things like, help me code on this thing, but also I want to learn more about the F-35. I want to know more about anti-drone technology, right? So these are, they're still, they're pursuing, what they can, and when they're done with the productivity pieces, they are trying to get behind the curtain, let's say.
Yeah.
And that is a constant thing. So we're, at Google, we're really trying to ensure that we keep these models safe.
Well, Matt, what about that? I mean, so Sandra said that we don't want to see Gemini out there scanning for vulnerabilities. I actually would push back on that a little bit. Wouldn't it be better if GPT 4.0 or 03, 04, what's the latest? I can't keep track.
I'm okay
we're
if
great at
he's
naming
doing
things.
it, but
Yeah, 03 is the latest, right? 03 is the latest,
Yeah,
hottest,
that's right.
greatest. Okay, all right, so 03, wouldn't it be great if 03 is out there scanning for vulnerabilities and helping us fix them in real time so we can identify as many as possible and knocking them down? I get that if we give them to the attacker's using them, but it's a race condition, right? Why not have it go out and scan, have your most performant model, and maybe in your own internal ones, scan, and then you share that information with the developers and say, hey, look, get ahead of this. I've found 15 vulnerabilities. You go fix it. Isn't that the beauty of potential collaboration here?
Yeah, is the risk like intrinsic in the discovery of the risk, or is the risk intrinsic of the existence of the condition? Right.
Right.
It's a tool that we as defenders can harness to help get to it before the bad guys can. Right. Like for me, I don't want to know that there are. I would much rather know where all the sources of vulnerability in my organization and my systems are, so that I can either fix or address them, than know that there are risks but that they're not discoverable, right? Like, that's kind of how I think about it.
Right, okay, but so would you then, so let's say you could do that for the world though, right? Let's say you could deploy your latest, most performant model, or even your unconstrained version, and let it run wild, identify the vulnerabilities, and then share that information ahead of time with all your colleagues in industry to let them get ahead of the problems before they deploy, or even as they're deploying. Why not that approach?
So I think specifically on like the finding vulnerabilities, that's a great idea. Somebody should build that startup. But beyond
You heard
that,
it here first. Trademark, copyright, whatever.
Beyond that, we as an industry are finding ways to collaborate and work together. There are lots of things that will we have had Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, businesses will compete. One of the things that we're we're proud to collaborate and we won't compete on is like unity against the bad guys, right? So
Threat
that's pretty
intel exchange,
non-controversial.
Yeah.
100%.
So yeah, Jason, tell us about that. What is that? Say more about what that means in terms of unity against the bad guys. Then I see you guys do something else.
Yeah, let me
Jump
answer
in.
the question about
Yeah.
the access to the models
Yeah,
that
please.
are unfiltered real quick, and then I'll definitely touch on that. So I think there's a middle way to walk down this road that is the narrow correct path, and Sandra alluded to it with responsible deployment. We have a responsibility to make sure that our models are deployed in a way that doesn't make the world worse. And so,
Can you,
yeah, I think well, we've done move fast and break things, and that
Okay.
didn't turn out very well.
Okay.
So let's try something a little bit more responsible this time around. And I think that's kind of the philosophy that Anthropic has, and I think others are tracking the same way. But if you just think about the threat landscape, we know that there are amazing companies out there that are ethically grounded, that are trying to do the right thing to help the defenders. And I think there's two thought paths on this. One is you can do something very similar to KYC from the banking industry. If you know your customer, if you think that they're a responsible actor, if they've committed to following your acceptable use policy and they have a threat detection program, then I think it makes sense that at least for the dual use nature of cyber capability to consider partnering with these folks, whoever they are, whether they be in the public sector or the private sector, to help them also move faster on the defender side. Because you do need to be able to pen test systems to actually discover it. The thing is, that particular capability is a long horizon planning task. What I mean by that when I say long horizon, this is something where a long chain of reasoning has to be executed for a fully autonomous attack path. And that is a much different attack pattern and a much different safety protocol than just looking at code and telling you that there's a vulnerability there. Those are two different things. And I think sometimes we conflate the two things. And I think that looking at code and telling you that there's a vulnerability thing, 100% all people should have access to that. It's not a dangerous thing. We just want to stop shipping vulnerable code in the first place, so let's get that out as fast as possible. And then there's another thing, which is these long horizon tasks that I think we need to do KYC for. To the question about threat intel sharing, there's the Frontier Model Forum, which all of the companies on stage here are a member of, which has an opportunity for us to exchange threat intel. And then the U.S. government has made some opportunities available for us as well to exchange threat intel on some of the threats that we're seeing emerge. And that's been really helpful. I think the U.S. AI Safety Institute, which was formed in the Biden administration and still exists in the Trump administration, has been a huge augmentation to our understanding of the threat landscape. And it's been an objective place to go to get an assessment and exchange information in a way that's protected.
So what about the concern, though, and this is a question for all of you, what about the concern that it's great that you all have responsible use policies and that you're trying to take action to ensure that the models you release are constrained in appropriate ways, and maybe you're using unconstrained versions internally, but what about the fact that there are open source models out there that are being released regularly without necessarily as much constraints? But beyond that, put aside anything developed in the United States or even in Europe, let's talk about models being developed in adversary nations, right? We won't name them, but everyone knows what I'm talking about, right? For models being developed in those countries or by actors who aren't constrained by the acceptable use or responsible policies that you have, aren't they going to get ahead of this problem even if you don't, and cause the problem even if you don't? And if they do, then what do you do in response? I know that you all, in addition to your own responsible use policies, you do sort of all have an asterisk in your policies which says, well, if market conditions change and somebody else puts out a model, right, we might skip over our policy to get in the competitive market. Isn't that just as much true when it comes to adversary models?
Well,
Matt, I'll start with you.
So I actually don't know if that spicy assertion you just made is true. I would need
The asterisk?
The asterisk. I would need to defer to our lawyers and policy people on that, but that doesn't.
I've heard that.
Right
I've heard that, but maybe that's wrong.
What was your question, though?
So the question is, aren't the adversaries going to release or have access to models that aren't yours, aren't constrained by your responsible use, acceptable use policies? And if so, aren't you undermining the capability of the defender by not giving them the latest, greatest thing, the unconstrained model?
I understand. So for what it's worth, I would need to go and confirm this. I'm pretty sure that most of our defensive capabilities are built on like public API, like release capabilities that we have.
Your internal defense capabilities.
There are some things that we've done like a little bit of fine tuning for and whatnot, but like broadly speaking, we've been able to get like tremendous leverage out of just like the frontier capabilities that like all of our customers have access to. So we when it comes to doing our like preparedness testing, right? We try to take the guardrails off the model because we want to see like the biggest, baddest, meanest version of the offensive capability that we could have, but. We haven't, at least within the security program, we have not really felt that constrained by the guardrails that exist for our defensive capabilities. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Sandra?
So I think that what we're counting on is that as we move into this future where every enterprise and individual is going to put their data, whether it's sensitive, private, or confidential, if they want to put it in these models, that they have to be sure that there are good safety and security protocols on them. And so if we have competing models that fail every safety test and Wiz does a red team report showing something is full of holes, I'm happy at the advancement and the speed of technology, but good luck winning in the enterprise and commercial space if people can't depend on you to keep your data safe. And I think that's where I think market forces have a big role here.
Absolutely.
Where a differentiation for all of us is going to be how secure, how safe, and how reliable is your system.
Yeah, in fact, Paladin came together with a group of other venture capitalists, and we actually, committed to only investing in capabilities that we believe are trusted, safe, and secure. For that very reason, we think it's the right investment thesis. It benefits our LPs, and our LPs are going to make more money if we invest in those capabilities because that's what the market's going to adopt. That's what's going to be sticky.
I have to amend my prior statement. We do have some defensive capabilities that are built on some things that we haven't released, but there's a lot you can do with what's out there.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, like if adversaries have access to models, what are they doing? They're trying to like exploit software, right?
Yeah.
It's not like AI is software. It's not like this is fundamentally these are new tools, new ways of approaching the problem. But like the toolkit that we as defenders have remains more relevant than ever,
Yeah.
right? So I think if anything, it reinforces the importance of like the fundamentals, like having a good program, defense in depth, sort of all those best practices.
Yeah. Jason, and then by the way, audience, we have time for about 10 minutes of questions. So if you have questions, come on up to the microphone and we'll take you as soon as Jason has his part.
Yeah, so on the open weights model question, one of the things that I think folks have not internalized yet is that running the unnamed model
I'll say it,
it requires a massive amount of hardware on the order of $50,000 worth of hardware to run it at a high speed.
Locally.
You can quantize it and you get degraded performance, and it's on the order of like $20,000 worth of hardware. But you need to be a relatively advanced person. And it requires much more hardware to even do the fine tuning if you want to strip out the safety protocols that open weights model has. And on top of all of the things that I just said, the open weights model that we're talking about here is 6 months behind state of the art from the companies on the stage here. So we do have an advantage, at least on the proprietary closed model side. And with the safety protocols that we have in place, and with the amount of expertise required to strip out the safety protocols on open weights models, I do think we have an advantage to be in an ecosystem where things are working out pretty well for all of us.
Do you think we'll keep that advantage? How long will the closed source proprietary models stay ahead of the best in breed open source? So will they always stay ahead because they have a profit motive, or is there a possibility the open source models will accelerate past because they've got more dev capability coming in to assess the weights and modify them?
There's been systemic evidence that I think Matt can also speak to this as well, that the models that we're talking about here have systematically distilled their intelligence from top tier frontier labs.
Right. So relying on that capability.
Yes, which is it's a kind of cheating on the test.
It's a bootstrap. Yeah.
Yes, it's a bootstrap. And so one of the things that people don't know is that to make very powerful AI, you need powerful AI. There's a reinforcement sort of treadwheel effect or flywheel effect. So you use the previous model to train the next model. And so far, what we're seeing in the open weights ecosystem is that they are taking advantage of these very powerful models from Western nations and using that to train up their own models. And so I think at least the evidence so far is that they haven't figured out how to be on the edge without cheating.
Which means they'll always be behind.
Yes.
Yeah. So Matt, is that been your experience? How do you see it?
So,
and folks, we're ready for audience questions whenever you want to, if you have them.
First, just zooming out, I think it's worth like maybe looking at like the endpoints on the timeline, like the transformer, the language model that what we know is generative.
2017, yeah.
What we know is generative AI. That paper was released in 2017. That was 8 years ago.
So
if
crazy.
we look at how much our space has changed in those 8 years, think 8 years in the future. It's really hard for
enabled by
anybody,
AI, by the way, enabled by AI innovation on top of that.
But it's really hard for anybody to credibly predict what the world is going to look like in 2033, right? But it's going to move fast. It's going to be wild. I'm excited for I'm excited for what it's going to do for our field for cybersecurity. What we've already seen the last couple of years, and we'll see where it takes us.
Sandra, any last thoughts before we take this audience question?
I think we're going to be okay. I
Yeah.
think it's all going to be all right. I think
Love
it's
it.
going to be
All
really
right.
exciting. So I'm looking forward to questions.
Awesome. Sir.
So yesterday, we had the silo problem with a bunch of data products, individual vendors all over the environment. We spent a lot of time solving that as defenders, a lot of resources solving that. As we get into an agentic AI world, where we're already seeing commercial releases at large scale that are being consumed by organizations, we get into a new place where the silo becomes context, right? Just to throw out an example, I think about Matt, you've got some internal models. Sandra, I think about a customer that has Google SecOps Enterprise deployed with Mandiant Intelligence in there. That's great. There's a lot of context within that tool set. But then when I bring along a third-party tool from Palo or some other vendor that is also agentic AI integrated and is supposed to do something for me, Qualys, Maybe it's my vulnerability management tool, right? How do we get through that context sharing? How does the AI age not create a new set of silos?
Yeah. What about that?
So I think context is exactly where like AI is poised to help us thrive, right? It's being able to integrate and operate not just on like the context in which the event occurs, but the conditions within it exists, right? So let's go back to like the finding vulnerabilities example. There are tons of static analysis tools out there that can, run rule sets across code, right? Whether you're looking for, a regular expression that, is tied to a known like vulnerability signature, or like dependencies that have known vulnerabilities, things like that. But that's relatively like limited in scope, relatively atomic. Think about the ability to ingest not just like the line of code you're analyzing and not just the entire code base, but like the conditions in which the code's being written. So like your CI configuration, your developer documentation, the custom cloud IAM rules that exist within your environment, the conditions within which it's going to be deployed. Those are all things that your developers are thinking about or synthesizing. It's that sort of that tools can't provide, but you need to fill in with sort of cognitive labor. That is exactly where context is able to help us move forward. So I actually view this as an opportunity and not a risk, right? We as practitioners need to like do the right engineering around it and need to set ourselves up to harness it. But it's going to help us as security professionals do more than we can do with the tools that we have today.
Additional thoughts, Sandra?
No, I'm not have nothing to add to that.
One more quick thought. So one of the things that's very endemic about siloing that I think is germane to this question is that typically what happens is that organizations use either SaaS software or existing enterprise workplace products like Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 as the mechanism by which those silos are enforced. And so when I think about using AI and different parts of your organization having AI deployed in those silos, something like Model Context Protocol or the Agent-to-Agent Protocol that Google and others proposed recently, those are opportunities for agentic systems to sort of reach across boundaries in a protocol agnostic way and model agnostic way to find the information that's necessary for those agents to bridge the gap, to get out of the silo, to find the information that will help them be effective.
Awesome. All right, last question.
Yes, thank you all. All of you sort of have products that are both being deployed for consumers as well as for enterprises. And so I'm curious, as you think about the security considerations and sort of building strong guardrails into the technologies themselves, whether you're sort of viewing those two security considerations as separate things, interconnected things, and sort of whether one is sort of leading the charge as you're thinking about the security strategy for the technologies. So if enterprise is kind of leading because there's more demand for security considerations, or vice versa. Just curious on your takes on that.
Matt, we'll start with you and go down the row.
It's a great question. I mean, we want to be able to offer, sort of this we want to be able to live up to the same principles, right? But I will say that consumers and enterprises broadly have different needs and different things they look for. So, for example, we built a series of APIs that if you are a enterprise system administrator, you can use to define, RBAC and audit what's happening within your organization. If you are a ChatGPT consumer user, where you're the only user of that account, you obviously don't have that same concern, right? It's just sort of like a different, feature set for a different user. And I'd say that what we're trying to do at OpenAI is, OpenAI is a mission-driven company. We're here to make sure that AI, benefits all, and we want to be addressing all of these needs in the ways that they require.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's not a this or this. It's both have their own unique requirements. So, in Google Cloud, we're looking at enterprises that, we need to make sure that our integrations with, other third-party applications are secure. We are looking at the needs of businesses and enterprises with thousands of customers. And then on the user side, again, just as Matt said, they have a different set of priorities. But I think safety and security, it's not just a It is a market differentiation. It is a complete, secure by design concept that we have to deliver on both sides. And I think that that's simply a way that we have to do. It's not optional, and both sides need to be prioritized.
Yeah, just to add a little human color on this, it's been our experience at Anthropic that people have some of the most private and heartfelt and important conversations on the personal side of the product with an AI that feels like it empathizes with them. And some of those conversations are the most sensitive things that people have ever put in writing. And treating that burden as our most important responsibility to ensure that that privacy is protected and those prompts never leak is something that I take very seriously. There's so many core technologies that can protect user privacy on this side that all three of the companies on this stage are investing in. An example is row-level encryption, which is a super important feature to ensure that it's virtually impossible for there to be a data leak. It requires a massive engineering lift to implement these things, and it's expensive. But we have to ensure that these very private conversations are protected. Another thing that all of us on this stage have started leaning in towards is something called confidential computing. On the enterprise side, because enterprises want that confidence that there can't be a data breach for their API traffic. And so in December, I announced on stage with AWS that AWS is deploying confidential compute, Google has a confidential compute offering, and I think Azure with OpenAI's models now has a confidential compute offering as well. These are all really important technological features that the engineering required to build was a massive lift, and it's just the kind of thing that you're not going to be able to find on the open market in any other place.
Awesome. All right, with that, please join me in thanking the panel.